1.3, we are going to talk about how to collect data and different ways that we can sample data. Okay, and we're going to talk about different methods, different thoughts on how to do this, so that you can get a sense of how to then use that information to interpret the data that's in front of you, which ultimately is what we want to do. So the first thing we're going to do is talk about ways of collecting data. And I'm going to give you a few different examples there. It's not an exclusive list. There are other ways besides the ones that I'm about to show you, but these are the first few. First way of collecting data is a survey. We do that a lot. It's often convenient, right? Everybody else does the work for you sometimes. You know, you set up you do the work at the front end and you make a survey monkey, you send it out to everybody and they fill it out. So the other people offer up the information for you. That's one way to collect data. Surveying records. Now this is the opposite. The records already exist. The researcher is going to sit down and go through the records that you have. I do that all the time with grades. I'm looking at kids' grades on assignments or quizzes or tests and try to draw conclusions from it, right? You guys like to see the class average because generally what you want to do is try to feel better about your crappy score because you want to look at the class average and say, oh, the whole class did bad. So that's why you'll find out in my tests and quizzes, you can't see it. Because that has, yeah, see, it doesn't matter. How you did is how you did. I don't curve stuff. So just keep that in mind, okay? That's another way of surveying records.
It's kind of nice though.
Another way is direct observation, okay? In a previous school that I taught in, where I taught a probability and statistics class, we spent time doing what were called investigations, and one of the studies that was conducted was whether or not cars came to a complete stop at a stop sign. So there was literally somebody tracking that, sitting there watching that, and collecting the data that way. Okay? So the researcher is going to observe and record. That's another way to collect data. Okay, and those are the three main ones that we're really going to talk about in this section. Okay? Any questions about any of those? There are 4 basic sampling techniques. So the fact is if for example I wanted to find out that stop sign thing, and I just went up to the stop sign right here right at the end of the school by the back gate. That would be really easy for me because it's right up the road and I could get a sense of whether or not we needed to do something different at that intersection, right? So that might come into play. So first of all, one type of sampling, that wouldn't be random because most of the time, especially if I was there at 7 in the morning, you know, I'd be dealing with a lot of you guys driving through there, right? Random sampling selected by chance. A lottery method, for example. A random number method. There should be a comma there. Okay. A random number generator, where every person in a population or everything in a population was assigned a number, and then we used a random number generator to select those participants in the study. Okay, that's what random sampling is. Subjects are selected by chance. Okay, another sampling method is known as systematic sampling. Okay, the key thing to systematic sampling is this: every nth element is selected. So, for example, if I put all the names of the students at Bishop Verot into on a list and assigned them all numbers, 1 to 670, I think that's how many kids we have about. And every student got one number, and I selected every 7th person. So I picked 7, 14, 21, etc. until I had my sample. It has to be every nth element, okay? So it can't be the third and then the seventh and then the 12th. It'll always be the every 10th, every 7th, every 4th, every other, that kind of thing. That's systematic, where a system has been created to select those participants in the study. Third type of sampling technique is called stratified sampling. And what happens is the population is divided into subgroups. So again, if I stuck with the idea of the students at Bishop Moreau, what might be some fairly obvious subgroups in terms of Bishop Moreau students? Freshmen.
Football team.
Okay, well let's try to keep it consistent for a second. So freshmen would be one group, sophomores would be one group, juniors, seniors. Those would be 4 different groups. If you wanted to look at it from sports, okay, the only problem with putting them into sports,
Some people don't play sports.
that's the one. The people that don't play sports. If they don't play, they're not included, they don't have a chance to participate in the study. And the key thing here is it's from the entire population. So the only way we could do that is if we chose sports, is one of the groups would have to be called people who don't play sports. Okay? So if you wanted to indicate, and Alex, you're right, if people play more than one sport, do we count them in both groups? Or do you only count them in the first group, whatever the first group is? Okay? Because we don't want to increase their opportunity for being chosen to be in the study. Because if they play football and then they also play basketball, we don't want that kid to have 2 chances to be in the study, where the kid who only plays football gets 1 chance. So we'd have to come up with some system there. So that's an example of strata. Okay, and their freshmen, sophomore, junior, seniors is right there. How many didn't even see that up there? All right, good job. So then once the groups are selected, you randomly select from each of those groups. So stratified sampling is sort of a random sampling type. It's just you create these subgroups within the population first. Okay? And then the last one that we're going to look at is called cluster sampling. Sometimes cluster sampling is called convenience sampling. So for example, if I was, again, doing a study of Bishop Moreau students, and I just selected my 7th period to choose to participate in the study, I've clustered you guys together in one group, my 7th period. In fact, it's really easy for me and convenient for me, because you're all right here right now, and I might as well just knock it out and get my study over with. So clusters are going to be selected from a group of similar characteristics.
Isn't that like stratified?
No, it is not. Because I'm going to select all of that group to sample.
Oh, okay. And
Okay.
then the other one is just
Random from each group. Yep. So if I was walking around at Flex, here's another example, okay? So as soon as I walk around first Flex, when you guys are all eating, okay, if I walked into the cafeteria and went to the closest table to me, and I asked those people their answers to whatever my study was, that's a clustering, right? It generally excludes a whole bunch of the population, because it's easy for the researcher to ask those people, to get the information from those people. Okay? Okay, and again, convenience sampling is something that we were just talking about a little bit. Sometimes it can be known as cluster sampling. It depends on the exact circumstances. Okay. And again, convenient sampling is something that's convenient for the researcher. Okay. It's usually the least random of all of them. And this is the thing when I talked about bias. Validity comes into question with convenience sampling because of those things. it's usually not an accurate representation of the population. Again, if I surveyed you to make decisions about where we should go on certain things with our school, it's probably not very reflective of the entire school population, right? Most of you are seniors. Whether you like to believe it or not, freshmen should get a say in the direction of our school. Sophomores should get a say as well.
Yeah, 'cause they have to be.
Okay. So, if I only surveyed you about whether or not students should be allowed to leave campus at lunch, okay, that wouldn't be necessarily an accurate reflection of the rest of our school. And so the validity of the conclusions from that survey might need to be questioned. Okay, that's an example. Now, the next thing we're gonna do is just go through some examples and decide which one it is. Okay, so you can get an idea of what we're doing here. Okay, are there any questions before we do that? All right, so. Just gonna say whether or not it's random, systematic, stratified, or cluster. And I'm gonna put the description on the screen. If you wanna take a picture of it and put it in your notes, you can. You don't feel like you have to type every one of them out or write every one of them out, okay? So here's the first one. As a part of its customer satisfaction program, a flooring installation company visits the site of every 5th sale and evaluates the quality of the installation. Okay, go ahead and get that in your notes. What's the giveaway here? Every 5th, okay? The giveaway is every 5th sale. Therefore, it has to be systematic sample, okay? How many had that? Okay, here we go, next one. Okay, so this, helps to have a little context here before we try to figure out which one it is, okay? And, you know, one of the things that's frustrating to me when I see people posting stuff on social media about they need to teach more of this in school and why don't they teach me how to do my taxes in school? Blah, blah, blah. Okay, first of all, none of you, well, very few of you have to file taxes every year anyway, so it just really doesn't have any real meaning to you yet. I get that one day it will, but just the same way as it doesn't have meaning to you now, the quadratic formula might not have meaning to you now either, and it may or may not later. The point that I'm trying to make here is you might not even understand what's being talked about in this problem. Does anybody think they get what's going on here?
No, I just read the last sentence.
Alright, Danny, what do you think? Try to explain it to me.
So, a city board, city council wants to estimate which homes are making improvements without a building permit, which means that they're breaking the law.
Okay, so explain that. Does anybody know what he's talking about?
Wait,
About
say
building
that.
permits?
Oh, yeah, I know.
What do you need a building permit for?
To make sure that you build something within code so that we can withstand certain natural disasters, certain things that are in that area. So for example,
How many of you know that already?
Or
That you
maybe
have to have,
something.
if you're gonna make changes to your home or build something on your home, that you need a building permit. How many know that?
I knew you had to get it, like, approved. I didn't know you needed a permit.
Right, so you're supposed to get it permitted ahead of time. Now, this taxation board, okay, they want to see how many people made improvements without a building permit. Okay, so they're gonna randomly select a sample of 100 city blocks. Is that big?
Yeah.
Yeah.
100 city blocks.
What's the size of the city?
Thank you. That's a good question. We don't know how big the city is. But if we're gonna select a sample that's 100 city blocks, we could probably fairly assume that this city is fairly large.
Yeah.
Okay? Alright. Now, which one is it gonna be?
Stratified.
No, it's random.
How is it random?
Random within a sample of what?
Cluster.
100 of them. It's a portion of the whole group.
What?
It's a portion of the whole population, and it's 100 city blocks, and they're gonna randomly ask those people in that little group.
Oh.
Okay?
No, it couldn't be
Only
that.
gonna
Because they
ask
all
one
has to be-
person.
To be stratified, you have to separate it into clearly different groups.
Oh.
The stratified pieces, it's random within those
Like 100
pre-created
city
groups.
blocks, X amount is like apartments and then X amount is.
Or if you said, if you broke it up by street, I'm gonna ask people on this street, then I'm gonna ask people on that street, then I'm gonna ask people on that, and I break it up into 3 streets and I ask random people on each street. So I've broken it into subgroups and then systematically, sort of, randomly select from each of those, okay? I shouldn't have used the word systematically since that's one of our things. That'll really confuse you. Alright, next. Go ahead and get that one in. So notice the difference between this one and the last one. The last one we broke it down into one other group. This one gets broken down into several groups. And then they're randomly selected from each of the groups.
Oh,
Which one is this?
oh,
This one is stratified. Okay. So the strata are the management group, the skilled group, the non-skilled group. It's unfortunate that's the best name they could come up with for a group of people at a business. Non-skilled. That's terrible. Okay. There's the last one. I mean, a lot of the times you have to look at the conditions. Obviously, the word randomly sort of gives it away. Obviously, the fact that we did one of each sort of gives it away. But the fact is that all the employees are assigned a number. That's the key.
Wait, so this one's random?
Yep.
Well, then we did two random.
No, we didn't.
This is cluster. I didn't even do myself.
The first one was systematic, then cluster, then stratified. This one's random. Again, the key thing here is that they're selecting from all members of the population to have a chance to be selected. This is key. Okay? That's what makes it random. And because of that, because each person has an equal chance to be selected, the goal is, if you want to get the most accurate results out of your study, you want to use random sampling. And we're going to talk about that more later. That's coming up in, I think, 1.5. And we really do some analysis on our studies. Okay? Any questions about any of that?